no more drilling on federal lands, no more drilling, including offshore.
President Joe Biden has just broken a major campaign promise, and I'm going to discuss what that is. I'm also going to break down what their defense of this is. I'm also going to show you some reactions online, including from a former Democratic vice president. And I got a couple of clips in this video as well. So this broken promise is on the issue of climate. Here it is. The administration has now approved the controversial Alaska oil drilling project. So before I get into more on this, I want to show you what Joe Biden said during a debate in the Democratic primary.
Number one, no more subsidies for fossil fuel industry, no more drilling on federal lands, no more drilling, including offshore, no ability for the oil industry to continue to drill, period. Ends.
There you go. A very clear campaign promise that was just clearly broken. And it's not just about breaking a campaign promise. We're talking about the future of humanity on the planet. And before I even get to more on this, some of the defense will be, oh, well, Donald Trump would have been worse. Yes. Is that the metric we're working by, that Donald Trump is the bar? Or should we be, setting the standard that maybe we should be looking out for the future of humanity on the planet? I think that's a bar that makes a little more sense. So this is an issue that is incredibly important. This is not just, some random promise that, oh, it would have been nice if you did this, but you didn't do it. We're talking about a major new fossil fuel project. So more on that here before I get to some reactions and the immediate fallout from all of this. So the multi-billion-dollar project will be located inside the National Petroleum Reserve, about 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle, and could produce nearly 600 million barrels of crude oil over the next 30 years, according to the Interior Department. The department noted in announcing the approval that it would reduce the scope of the plan, I'll get to more on that in a second, called the Willow Project, by denying 2 of the 5 drill sites proposed by ConocoPhillips, Alaska's largest crude oil producer. The department estimated that the project could produce nearly 250 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. So to give you more context for this number, because most people don't know what the hell this means, obviously, this puts a clearer picture on it. So Willow would lock in an estimated 9.2 million metric tons of carbon dioxide a year, equal to driving nearly 2 million gas-powered cars for potentially 30 years. So this is a massive project. And if you read more into this, it's unlikely a project like this of this size will come up again because of the immediate blowback and immediate lawsuits that a company trying to do this would likely face. And we're already, as I'll get to in this video, seeing that with this project. But this is a massive project. Now, the part of the defense from the White House is that, well, look, we reduced the scope of the plan. So they wanted 5 drill sites. Well, we said, no, we're only doing 3 drill sites. We took away 2, only doing 3 drill sites. ConocoPhillips wanted 5. We told them no. Here is what the CEO of ConocoPhillips, Ryan Lance, said on CNBC just 8 days ago.
There is I guess the worst outcome or political outcome could be the Biden administration approves it, but only in a limited way, what they call 2 pads. Then it's not economic for you to. So it's got to be at least 3 what they call pads, correct?
Yeah. So three spots to drill the wells from to develop the field. Yes, and we've been very clear with the administration that a 2-pad approval is like not approving the project.
But then they could say they approved it and ConocoPhillips didn't do it.
Certainly, that's what people worry about, and that's why we've been very clear with the administration. A 2-pad approval is a not approval of the project.
So the White House did approve 3 pads, not 2, 3. They did exactly what ConocoPhillips wanted. What this company deemed to be economically viable. Which could just mean, well, I wanted, $1 billion bonus, so that's what's economically viable to us. Because we don't know the details. Does the White House know the details of what's in their books? Are they looking over the numbers and seeing what's going to work for them? No, they're just listening to what the company says. The company says what's viable for us is three pads. Why not? So the The other defense they're making here is that, well, we could have been sued by the company because it's their land. It was already kind of pre-approved before. We'll then go through with the lawsuit and see what happens. Try and fight it, as opposed to just giving in and giving them exactly what they asked for. So more on part of the defense here. This is from the Washington Post. Quote, this was an existing project that the U.S. government had already given ConocoPhillips the rights to the reserves, and they would have lost in court if they had been sued and forced to greenlight this project, said Amy Myers-Jaffe, director of the Energy, Climate Justice, and Sustainability Lab in New York University School of Professional Studies. Quote, given the cards that were on the table, I think it's interesting that the administration tried to negotiate a solution that could both stand up in court and would minimize the impact on places that are very sensitive, she said. So, look, this is one person's opinion. But even if there was a lawsuit over this, there's going to be, like, that would not be the end of the story. Like, the White House wouldn't have to give in immediately. They could fight it. Just because this person's saying that 3 pads stands up in court doesn't mean that the White House couldn't argue that something different and still approve the project with 2, knowing that isn't economically viable, but still constitutes an approval in the sense that they approved the land for this company, which, look, I'm not a lawyer, but in my mind, why wouldn't that hold up if you still approve the project? If it isn't economically viable for the company, that isn't the White House's fault. That's the company's fault. So why does the White House have to do what is economically viable for this fossil fuel company as opposed to, I don't know, what is environmentally viable for the future of the planet? But what do I know? So Kamala Harris, VP Kamala Harris, responded to criticism on this. So Stephen Colbert asked her during an appearance to respond to criticism of Biden approving the Willow Oil Project. Her defense is, quote, the concerns are based on what we should all be concerned about, but the solutions have to be and include what we are doing in terms of going forward, in terms of investments. So just a BS answer here saying, well, we're making other investments. Okay. You're also approving this massive new fossil fuel project that will be in operation for at least 30 years. So here's the response from another VP. Al Gore warns it would be recklessly irresponsible to allow Alaska oil drilling plan. The ex-vice president says new projects are a recipe for climate chaos ahead of Biden administration's decision on Willow development. So his direct comments here, quote, the proposed expansion of oil and gas drilling in Alaska is recklessly irresponsible. The pollution it would generate will not only put Alaska Native and other local communities at risk, it is incompatible with the ambition we need to achieve a net zero future. We don't need to prop up the fossil fuel industry with new multi-year projects that are a recipe for climate chaos. Instead, we must end the expansion of oil, gas, and coal and embrace the abundant climate solutions at our fingertips. So a former vice president who is well aware of, how these projects operate, how the approval process works, here he is saying it should have been denied. You also have reactions here from those fighting for the climate. Sunrise Movement says President Biden officially approved the Willow Project instead of sticking to his own climate goals and listening to the millions of young people who carried the party for the last 3 election cycles. POTUS is letting the fossil fuel industry have their way. Gen Z for Change here tweeting out, we are Gen Z for Change, a coalition of Gen Z activists who have worked with POTUS for the duration of his presidency. Despite our working relationship, we want to make one thing clear. The approval of the Willow Project is a slap in the face to young people across the country. This also goes to the potential impact, apart from the obvious impact on climate, the potential impact of a decision like this in damaging Biden's youth turnout in the next election. You approve a project like this, you're going to lose a lot of young people who are going to think, what's the difference? Even though, yes, there is, let's be clear, there is clearly a difference between the Democratic Party and how they operate in this space compared to Republicans. But if you still aren't doing nearly enough in terms of what is necessary to slow down and stop the production of fossil fuels, then there isn't much of a difference in the actual impact of those decisions. One is accelerating the problem. The other is simply delaying it, delaying the inevitable. Democrats will lose elections if they don't get out youth turnout. So this is not only a terrible decision for the planet, it's a terrible decision for them politically. Reaction here from Maxwell Frost, a new member of Congress, saying, "I'm very disappointed in the president for approving the Willow Project. Youth voter turnout was at its highest in 2020, and young folks supported him because of commitments such as no more drilling on federal land. That commitment has been broken. We deserve a livable future." Now, last thing here, this is the immediate fallout from this decision. So they wanted to avoid a lawsuit. Well, they're getting one anyways. So conservation groups sue to stop the Willow Oil Project in Alaska's Western Arctic. The administration's environmental review failed to account for project's full climate impact. So these lawsuits are coming from Earth Justice, as well as Trustees for Alaska. And the legal challenge targets the Biden administration for failing to consider alternatives that could have meaningfully reduced greenhouse gas emissions and on-the-ground effects. Interior has relied on a mistaken conclusion that it could not deny nor meaningfully limit the project, and it considered project alternatives that ranged only from allowing ConocoPhillips to develop 100% of the available oil to allowing it to develop 92% of the oil. The Biden administration had the authority to stop Willow, yet chose not to. The lawsuit also takes the administration to task for failing to assess Willow's full climate impact by neglecting to consider the additional climate pollution of future development that can only happen once Willow project infrastructure is in place. ConocoPhillips has described Willow to its investors as the next great Alaska hub, saying it had identified a staggering amount of oil, possibly as much as 3 billion barrels, of nearby prospects that could be accessed if the Willow infrastructure were in place. So we're going to see, of course, if anything comes of these lawsuits. But the idea that they had to do this because they would have been sued, well, they're being sued anyways. So you might as well try and fight the project and see what happens.